I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Behave yourselves!
Hello YouTubers out there, this is Jerry Saravia at the movies. So today we're taking a look at The Holdovers, which is a new film by director, screenwriter Alexander Payne, who's best known for films like Citizen Ruth, which was his directorial debut from 1996, not to mention Election, About Schmidt, Sideways, The Descendants. They didn't see Downsizing, but Nebraska, which is a very great film. So probably my favorites might be somewhere between Nebraska, Election, and this film, The Holdovers. Well, and About Schmidt. He is a terrific film director, I gotta say. So right off the top, The Holdovers begins like a 1970s movie that we just recently discovered, that had been out of the loop for too long. That's kind of how the film starts. And in many ways, this film has a particular kinship, I think, with the late film director Hal Ashby. And I'll get back to that in a minute. I think that Alexander Payne shares a lot of the same qualities as director Hal Ashby. So anyway, let's move on to what I would describe as irresistibly bittersweet. That's how The Holdovers holds over for me, I guess. Paul Giamatti, who was also in Sideways, plays a professor of European history at the Barton Prep School in New England, and this is set in 1970. And he is a pipe-smoking, Jim Beam-imbibing European history teacher, Paul Hunham. All the students hate this guy. He gives them D pluses and Fs. This is just before the Christmas break. And except for one student, Angus, played by first-timer Dominic Sessa. Was it Dominic? Now I forgot. Oh, how quickly I forget. Yes, Dominic Sessa. And Dominic Sessa, I think, scores a B+ on the last new exam prior to the semester break. But everyone else does poorly. And so they are ready for Christmas break, but Hunham wants to start the new chapter, which usually would be left till the beginning of next semester, and all the students hate this guy. He smells like fish. He smokes one too many pipes, perhaps. He drinks a lot, and I would almost call him an alcoholic, but this is one of those movies where you don't really judge the characters by how much they imbibe, but rather their character, who they are as people. And Hunham is the newly elected teacher to be held over, or be the holdover teacher for the semester. That means that there are some students who can't go anywhere, can't be with their families for one reason or another during the Christmas break. So they have to stay in the school. And he's the one that's going to be supervising. He's been elected to do such a thing. Hunham doesn't care because he doesn't seem to really have a family. He's not married. He loves his books. He loves to read and to pontificate about all sorts of trivia. And so Dominic Sessa is one of his character, Angus, is the one that's the most distraught over having to stay over the holidays. He was going to stay with his mother and her new husband. His father supposedly had died a while back, so this is his stepfather, played, by the way, by an actor I haven't seen in quite some time, Tate Donovan. And he really doesn't, he wants to be with his mother, but the mother tells him on a phone call, no, we're going to celebrate our honeymoon. And he just can't believe at last minute that this is what happens. And so there are a couple of other students who also have to stay. One that actually seems to get into a fight here and there with Angus. Angus is kind of a tall, lanky individual. He is not unlike Hunham in the sense that he's not sure if anybody really likes him. And he doesn't seem to really... He cares, but he can understand. He's able to deal with that reality. The other person staying is the cafeteria's head cook, Mary Lamb, played by, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, Divine Joy Randolph, who I had seen in TV's People of Earth, a pretty good show that I'm sorry is not on anymore. So now a few of these students actually managed to leave because they were able to get a ride out through a helicopter and join with their families. Something just works in their favor, but still not for Angus. And so the rest of the movie is Angus and Mary and Paul Hunnam. And they're inside the Barton school. And we get to learn about them. Mary Lamb had a son who died in Vietnam, so around the holidays she's quite morose, which is expected. Paul Hunnam, again, doesn't have much of a family, but he understands that life is bitter, and it can be bittersweet, it can be complicated, but it's bitter mostly. And he knows life is that way. He tries to explain that to Angus. And he also feels, which I thought was a scene that really encapsulates what we love about Paul Giamatti in general, but particularly for this character. It's kind of a real turning point just to understand where he's coming from. He says, but life is bitter and complicated, and that it feels the same about me. That line kind of there are a lot of quotable lines in this movie. Don't cross the Rubicon, which if you saw in the trailer, you'll appreciate that. But it was just, the movie really unfolds like life. It doesn't really have a specific plot. Technically, it's about Angus trying to want to go on a trip to Boston, and there's a reason behind it, but I won't give it away. And Mary, who wants to see her pregnant sister. So there is a road trip movie in here as well, in addition to the witty repartee, of Paul Hunnam, and especially of Angus. And earlier in the picture, the school administrator has a party at her house, a Christmas party, and she invites Paul Hunnam and Angus and Mary Lamb. And Paul takes it to mean that she's somewhat flirtatious with him, that she has an interest in him. And then we discover, much to our disappointment as well, I think, once we empathize with Paul Hunnam and see him not just as a strict, kind of sardonic or sarcastic type of teacher, but somebody with a great deal of humanity who, understands people. We feel disappointed with him when we discover that she's involved with somebody, the school administrator. And I don't want to say too much about this film because, to me, it's a film that's filled with sweetly tempered tones. It's hard to describe, but there's a comfort level to this film because we get to know these three people so intimately. And the characterizations are very richly textured, I thought. Quotable dialogue, especially from Giamatti's Hunnam. An absorbing mix of academic life as well, which reminded me a little bit of Dead Poet Society to a certain extent, and along with the road movie aspirations, and a very touching, witty finale that you don't really see it coming, but it actually shares a little kinship as well with Dead Poet Society, although I think Dead Poet Society is a lot more somber than this film. Some people have interpreted this movie, which I've read a couple of comments from people who seem to really love it, and others that said it's depressing, that it needed to be upbeat. It's not a depressing picture. I do think it's more upbeat than downbeat overall. Not that the film really wallows in bitterness, but it does wallow in some sense of some life-affirming lessons, without beating you over the head with it. And considering this is Alexander Payne, who worked on this film, there is a different screenwriter credited to this picture, which is, his name is in here somewhere, and I don't see it right off the top, sorry. Oh, goodness. David Hemmingson. I feel Alexander Payne contributed. It's sort of like an uncredited writing on this picture. I certainly believe that. But Paul Giamatti, this new kid, Dominic Sessa, Divine Joy Randolph, they just inhabit this film. It is their film. I just can't say how happy I was to see a film that deals with complicated issues, complicated emotions, and dealing with an era that seems so long ago and so probably foreign to a lot of people, but yet the emotions and everything else is universal. It still would go on today. You know, we all have our issues with people we've lost, people we've lived with or didn't want to live with, or people we long for or pine for. You know, those type of things are still part of our humanity, our collective humanity, I think. So Alexander Payne is one of our great humanists, for sure, I think. And he does share kinship with director Hal Ashby, who made films like Shampoo, Harold and Maude, which is a really great film, and Heaven. Did he do Heaven Can Wait? I can't even remember now. Maybe that was Warren Beatty that directed it, although it feels like a Hal Ashby film. But he did several. I think he also did a film called The Landlord with Beau Bridges. And Hal Ashby's films also are very life-affirming, at least his best work, especially Harold and Maude, which is seemingly a black comedy, but then becomes something else, and it was really just magnificent. I think that's one of the best screenplays, one of the best movies ever made. So I see it that way, but I think Alexander Payne might be even more life-affirming than Hal Ashby. So in that sense, you know, there were some critics who also said, well, this doesn't really feel like a 1970s movie in the sense that, you know, could have emerged from the 1970s as a movie, as opposed to the movies of that period that showed that were a little more cynical, to a certain degree, a little more pessimistic about the state of things, which isn't true of all 1970s films. No, this film is really about the era of 1970. It just happens to be filmed as if it was coming from the 1970s. But I don't think Alexander Payne is trying to mimic so much the films of that time about that era, but rather mimic the era itself. And I think he does a fabulous job, and this is just a very great film. I can't say enough good things about it. Check it out. Watch the Holdovers. It's already coming to video on demand as of November 28th. I don't understand why. This film opened small, and it's just started to gain some traction and more screenings. You know, they're expanding the release, so I don't know why they don't just give it a chance and see how it does first before having it available for rent to watch in your own home. But that's the way things are now. So, anyway, those are my thoughts on The Holdovers. Please do check it out. Really great film. Thanks again to all my subscribers out there. If you haven't subscribed to my channel just yet, please do. And if you are a subscriber, hit that notification bell so you can find out any future uploads once they are uploaded. And that's all I got to say about that. Check it out. The Holdovers by Alexander Payne. And all his other films too, if you haven't seen them. And for Paul Giamatti especially. And first-timer Dominic Sessa. By the way, Dominic Sessa was in a theater program at some school, and that's how he was discovered. This is his first film, period. First anything, visually speaking. He's not been some sort of actor that appeared in TV or other films. This is just his first role. That's amazing. So definitely an actor to look for in the future. And that's all I got to say about that. And this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.